All right, I'm sitting over at the Patton residence here in Nowata, Oklahoma, and I'm sitting down with Jim Patton. Jim and I have known each other for several years, and he's very tied into the history of this town, of this area, and we've had a lot of really good conversations in the past, and I feel bad I haven't recorded any of them. So TJ and I got our stuff together this morning and came over to Jim's place, and I kind of had some idea of what we might talk about today, but I honestly never know where our conversations are going to go, and so it's just going to be free form, and we'll go until Jim or I gets tired. It'll probably be under an hour. So anyway, I want to thank you, Jim, for sitting down with me, and maybe a good place to start would be for posterity. Who are you? What's your basic general history in the church, in the town, and why am I talking to you? Why are you a resource?
Well, Linda and I were married in 1963 in her hometown in Nowata, Oklahoma. And over the next few years, we resided in Tulsa and Little Rock and moved to Nowata on December the 6th, 1968. And Linda's been a lifelong member of the Methodist Church. Beginning with the Methodist Church in Lenapaw, Nowata County. And I opened up a tire and appliance store here from scratch, and Linda began employment with the Nowata Public Schools. And in conjunction with that, we transferred memberships to the First Methodist Church here in Nowata. And we've been here ever since.
Yeah, you. I think you came from Barnesdall, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in Barnesdall, Osage County, Oklahoma. April 27th, 1938 is when I was born. And I came from a small town background, as well as Linda, Lenapaw.
Yeah. And then y'all were married in Lenapaw Methodist Church?
That's correct.
And then tied into the Nowata Methodist Church ever since y'all have been here. You played a pretty big role in different stages in the life of the church. The primary one I know about is the construction of the newest part of the building, the third sanctuary that this church community has had. But you and your wife also, Linda's sitting over here, she's not going to be on camera, but they were tied into, y'all did a lot of stuff for the youth. I think when your children were particularly young, you tried to coordinate some citywide efforts at youth stuff. I found some of these records from back in the day. And then I think you also played a role in church finance for some time, if I've seen some of that.
That is correct.
And then today, the way you flex your muscles usually, historically, is that you're a docent at the museum. Is docent the right word?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I sat with 2 or 3 other people, and we're there to greet and answer any questions that visitors to the museum may have. And the museum has been transferred to a bigger building and modernized, and it's a first-class operation. I encourage everybody, anyone interested in history, period, to go down and see it.
Yeah, we were talking before we turned the cameras on just about all the things that Harmon Foundation has made possible in this town, and of course you can't recite all the things even given a couple minutes, but it's been really a blessing to have them.
That's correct, and the building that the museum, the Historical Society is in today, was purchased by Harmon and completely updated, and it will be good for 50, 75 years.
Yeah, yeah. That old Landers building, who knew it was going to be the museum?
No one, including Mel Landers, who built it and had a grocery store in it.
Well, I brought one framed thing with me, if you could hand that to me. I figured we might start with the story of what this thing is. Do you recognize it?
No, not right offhand.
It's the burning of the mortgage.
Oh, yes, I know what that is.
And I'm pretty sure there's a story pertaining to your son that has to do with this.
That's right. That is probably done in the late 1970s. And we'll go into a little more detail, but when the current sanctuary part of the church was built, we had a note. We borrowed the remaining amount of money to finish it, and that is the burning of the mortgage.
Yeah,
and our
the
son,
date of it is on the bottom. Sanctuary mortgage burning, April 16th, 1978.
1978. Jim was 6 years old, and a very active 6 years old. And Linda and I was as nervous as we could be with him burning that. We could just see it getting out of hand and burning the church. But it didn't. We survived.
I think we have some pictures of that ceremony. I didn't think to bring them this morning, but we'll overlay that on the.
That's a very pleasant, special memory there.
Yeah, we have that right at the entryway in the church building. You look over to the left, and there you just see those ashes, and you have no idea what they are till you read the plaque. But
yeah, I'll comment a little more about that a little later.
Okay.
Kermit Dodd was a Methodist preacher here at the time, and he was very instrumental in getting the mortgage paid off early.
Which is no easy task. And then, so one of the things that's not been clear to me as I've looked through these old documents, and so y'all built the education wing in the late 1950s along with the parsonage about the same time. I want to say, well I don't
the parsonage was built in 1951, and that was the Painter family.
Right, yeah.
Gift.
Right. So that was a relatively easy thing to put together. The education wing was not as easy. Y'all took out a loan for that, but then you also took out a loan for the new building.
That's correct.
So, but to do the new building, was it just one loan, or were there multiple sources of loans?
On the new building, there was only one loan.
Okay.
We borrowed $60,000 at the end. On the building committee, we had 12 people, and when it came time to finalize the final loan, finish paying all the bills, all 12 of us went to the First National Bank, sat around the table, and all of us signed the note for $60,000, and it was paid off early, thanks to Kermit Dodd.
Good for him. Yeah. So let's go back before that. There was an initial building that the Methodist community initially built at the end of the 19th century, and that lasted for about 15 years until in 1910 they built the edifice that was very big and stately. It looked really nice. It served the church and really the entire town well for decades.
The first church was a very small white frame building,
right,
with a bell tower. Very common. You'll find that same structure at Lenapaw was one of them. My hometown of Barnesdall Methodist Church was the same structure. The plans were probably identical or modified very little for the local church. And as you said, that lasted about 15 years. And that time frame would have been probably in the neighborhood of 1895 to 1910. And the building that was torn down was built in 1910 and used for approximately 60 years, 1970. This whenever we moved in to the new one. And in between the time there was an educational building built that connected to the 1910 church. And it was educational. It was 2-story. And when Linda and I came in late 1968, unfortunately, the loan on that was in arrears on the educational building. And the preacher had kind of lost interest in it, and it was pretty well, the servicing of the debt was pretty well neglected. And it was to the point where First National Bank, who had the loan, had been essentially not addressing the lateness, and they were about to the point where they had to. So we had not been here very long, and I immediately was participating with the finances at the First Methodist Church, and a small group of men, we got together and divided up names of the congregation and started knocking on the doors to raise money. That note on the educational building had been for 15 years, and it was the total amount was for $35,000. And I don't recall what the unpaid balance was, but within a short period of time, the visits paid off, and that was caught up and paid off.
And that was before y'all started plans for the construction of the new building?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That was done we had that paid off in 1969.
Okay.
We had about 6 months there of fairly dedicated raising money through the congregation. And the money was here. It had just been neglected and hadn't been brought to people's attention. And when it was, money came in, debt was retired.
So y'all moved here in '68?
Yes.
Instantly
68.
Plugged into the church.
Yes.
Instantly became part of the church financial
That's correct.
Picture. Pretty quickly got it back together. And then was it at that point, after y'all paid off the debt, that it instantly turned to, hey, this building is not doing so well and we should replace it?
Yes. There were concerns. This building was, the church building, part of it, was 60 years old. It had a flat roof on it. Those are always maintenance all the time. And it had significant leaks when it rained.
Well, it had like a rotunda thing at the very top center.
On the top.
Did that get blocked off over the years, or was it still open at the end?
It was still there.
Okay.
But it did leak at heavy rains. And the water would come down, and as some of the old timers said, waterfalls. And there was a basement which had housed a large gas range, commercial. And in heavy rains, while the pilot would go out and the gas would accumulate, it's fortunate that that corner didn't blow up, the gas leaks, and then the water off the hill came in, and there was anywhere from a foot or two of water in the basement in heavy rains. But the kicker in this deal was twofold. The older building had to have constant maintenance, and that was an expense, and it was very costly to keep up an old facility. And then there was the steps on the east side and on the north, and they were significant and they were steep, and the congregation was getting older and older, and it was a struggle for most of the older people to come to church, and that alone was reason enough to take the old building down and put a new one up.
Yeah, all these buildings, Methodist, well, I can't speak to other denominations, but Methodist buildings, they were built on these home mission extension office, I think is what it was called. The denomination sent out these floor plans, had a couple hundred. Apparently we got our floor plans for the second church building from a church in Texas. But what was normal was to have a basement you could go down into, and then a first floor you could go up into, but you couldn't, there were hardly any Methodist churches at the time where you could just walk straight in. And so all these young congregations that built it eventually grew old enough so that they were cursing themselves for not making it more accessible. So yeah, some churches installed elevators. This church chose just to demolish because there were several problems with the edifice, but accessibility, the way Floy Schaefer wrote about it in her history, the building would sway sometimes, and it was not structurally sound. They stopped letting large gatherings come in there. at one point, and I don't know if that was before renovations or not.
I don't have a time frame knowledge on that, but I can say this: there was a balcony in it, and it had wooden chairs. They were in a row, much like a lot of theaters had, movie theaters. They were wood chairs that had a folding seat up, and that was not in use.
The balcony wasn't. Nobody was allowed up there.
No, it was not. For safety reasons, and in fact, frankly, there was plenty of seating downstairs in the sanctuary. But it was there, but not in service. The positives were, when that church was built, there was a significant number of stained glass windows that were put in. And they were still viable. But whenever we got into the building program and taking down the old building, it was very clear that stained glass windows had also been neglected. And they were very loose. And it had been years, if it had been done at all, they'd never been re-leaded. And that was one of the major things that we did when we took them out. A fellow by the name of Scotty out of Bonita did the re-leading. And they've kept that up to the best of my knowledge, that the windows are still been very well maintained.
Yeah, they had to get some more attention. I think 2004 there had to be additional cleaning work done on them, which the Harmon Foundation also helped fund that, and then they were encased in glass casing that secures them a little bit more.
Yeah, particularly on the outside for fear of a BB or baseball or whatever.
Sure, yeah. But that's part of the story that's fun too, is from the second building to the third, we were able to preserve all but one or two pieces of glass that were initially purchased in 1910, and they're there today, even though the current edifice is much older or much newer than that. So that's a real treasure that we've had. I'm remembering that TJ and I scanned a number of pictures of the old sanctuary. I'm going to see if I can't bring these up in a way that you can see from there. I bring it over to you, but I can't. Can you see much of this from over there? So yeah, we've got the old sanctuary here. And then the old exterior, you see the stairs going up. More interior shots you got from the front. You can't really see the balcony in any of these, I don't think. This is how people would do it for weddings back in the day. And then that's 1956,
that's
whenever
parsonage
the
was
parsonage
built in 1951.
And then do you recognize, well, I don't know if this, 1968, I think these people served before 1968 when you would have gotten here. The only people I really know is Aline Merritt, right in the middle there. But the stained glass windows are right behind him. And then this is the Honor Agers group. These were the old timers in the 1960s that all got together in the church. And that was Juanita Clark, who was the secretary. Was she the secretary whenever y'all got here?
No, she was not. It was Eva Lou Hannigan.
Okay.
I believe she was teaching school. She was teaching school when we came.
Okay, so here's a photo of the new sanctuary, I think right after it was finished.
Yes.
It's before any pews or even chairs were in there. You have the piano back down here on the bottom left. Oh, and then here's the pictures that I just handed you. And then it skips to 1973. Well, no, that would have been pretty soon afterwards. So yeah, that's the bell tower. They made a big deal of ringing the bell again. And then, of course, we don't ring it anymore because I think it became structurally unsound. But yeah, that was the new church building soon after it was constructed. I hope to scan a lot more. But, I mean, you had everything to do with that. So when did that committee start getting together, do you know?
Yes. It was first brought up in fall of 1969. And the discussion was a work in progress, sort of. But by early 1970, it was clear that a program for a new sanctuary was going to be viable. And Bill Brown and I was selected to be co-chairman of the building committee, and then 10 other Methodist members was added to rounded out to the group of 12. And we began the discussion and then the plans for building the new church and taking the old one down. Initially, Bill and I proposed in casual conversation to the building committee that we could build a 60 by 100 foot building for $60,000, coincidentally, a metal building. And we did it on the back of an envelope, and crudely written, drawn out. And Bill and I both knew that there was no way that the congregation as a whole, and the building committee as well, would ever go for a metal building. But it was a starting point, and it went from there to the building that was actually built. The metal building concept never got off the ground.
There's some metal in it, but no, you don't see metal when
Oh,
it's a
my
lot of
goodness,
brickwork, and there's good wood, there's big quality wood beams.
Well,
and
another blessing in that regard, Russell McGee was a Tulsa architect. And Russell had grown up here in Nowata in the church, he and his parents. And his parents had a dry cleaning plant and business. And excuse me, Russell contacted Bill and told him he wanted to participate, that he had a lot of good memories of growing up in the Methodist church here, and that he wanted to do the architect work, and it'd be his gift. And that was just the beginning of what Russell contributed. As we progressed, it was very clear that financially, we were not going to be able to afford a building contractor. And Russell said, I know this young fellow. He lives out to Enid. He's in his middle 20s. He has a small travel trailer, and all he would need would be to hook it up to utility facilities. And he'll come and supervise. And he'll do a lot of the work in his skill levels, but he'll supervise everything. Literally saved thousands and thousands of dollars, and did a fantastic job. That was very critical in raising the money. On the building committee, Bill Brown took care of overseeing the construction. I participated as part of the building committee, and I took care of the finances. I reported weekly to them how much money we'd received, how the construction was going, and how many invoices had been paid. And it worked out very well. Bill was not a people person, but he was really good at ideas and construction and building and that sort of thing. And I was very good at keeping the bills paid, telling the congregation where we were at. And when we were having bills coming up and due and we were out of money, I would notify them. We had about somewhere between 6 and 10 members that always helped out when we needed it.
so, did I hear you say you were reporting to the congregation every week?
That's right.
So you would get up and worship every week and report on.
I would tell them how much money we'd had to date, how many outstanding bills we were going to have, construction was going on, and they, excuse me, they were completely aware of where we stood all the time. and I feel strongly about that.
Sure.
That
Did the conference play any kind of role in this, or was it all just
no,
locally?
it was all local.
Okay. Okay.
When we took the old building down, we had some surprises, and some of them are a little bit humorous. Bill and I contacted demolition companies in Tulsa. Had one come up, they looked at it to tear down the old one. And the estimate was in the upper $40,000, so over 45 and less than 50.
Just to tear down.
Uh-huh. And there was no way we could raise that kind of money. So we secondly got an additional quote from another firm in Tulsa, and they came down to the low 40s or upper 30s. We still were in trouble. That was money we couldn't get. And I don't recall which local person it was, and if they were Methodist or not, but someone in the Nowata community told Bill and I, there's a fellow in Bartlesville by the name of Elmer. Help me out, Linda. It'll come to me, folks, in a little bit. But we contacted Elmer, and we were told not to prejudge. He was an older guy, wore overalls, and had one of the most beat-up old Chevrolet pickups you could ever imagine. And he would come, and he'd bring two guys with him. Huh?
Was it Elmer Ford?
Yes.
Elmer Ford.
Yes.
Not Elmer Fudd, Elmer Ford.
Elmer Ford.
Yeah, okay.
And he came over, he brought two young black fellows with him. They were the guys that he used to go inspect things that he couldn't get to. He was an older guy with a full-bodied figure. He sent them up to look in the upper attic and everything, and into other places where he couldn't access. And he looked the building all over very carefully, and he was very impressed with the beams and the ceiling up above. They were hand cut, and they were 12 inches by 12 inches, and some of them were 40 to 60 feet long. And he said, there's a real market for that in California, building fancy homes. He said, I know where to sell that kind of stuff.
Oh, neat.
And then he said to Bill and I, he said, okay, guys, he said, well, we told him we'll get the attorney and drop a contract and that sort of thing. He said, no, we won't. He said, if you're going to do the stuff like that, you need to get somebody else, because Elmer Ford doesn't work that way. Here's what I can do. If it's acceptable, we're going to shake hands, and that's it. And then he gave us a number. He said, looks like it's about $4,000. And Bill and I couldn't get our hands out of our pockets to shake hands quickly enough. And that was it. No paperwork, no lawyer, no anything.
Wow.
And he did tell us, he said, I'm also liability insured, so you don't have to worry about that. As we progressed, Elmer, there'd been some people ask, and on the south side of the old building, there was stained glass windows, and they were probably 3x4, 4x4, and we put them, the ones we needed, on that same location at the south end of the new building up above, and we didn't need all of them. And Elmer said, I know there's a lot of people here in town would like to have a little bit of memento of this church. He said, I will have a sidewalk sale, an auction. He said, but I reserve the right, fellas, if they don't bring a fair price close to what I can get to them in salvage, he said, I'll shut it down. So on that sidewalk, we had some of those stained glass windows, and two of them sold for $15. And Elmer said, oh, that's it, no more, no more. He said, folks, those are worth several dollars more than that. He said, if I'm going to come out on this project here, I have to sell those where I get the most money for them. So two were sold locally. Goldie Ross bought one, and Spike Radcliffe bought the other. little story on that later. Then I'm going to fast forward a little bit to when Elmer had the whole building torn down.
Well, wait. At that point, at that sale, none of the other stained glass windows were sold at that point.
That's
It was
correct.
only so he just held on to them. Did y'all know you wanted to use them in the new building?
Well, no, we kept everything we were going to put in the new building was already designated.
Okay, but there were some stained glass windows that you weren't planning on using, and you said go
yeah,
ahead and
7
sell
or
them.
8 of them.
Okay, okay.
And after Elmer Ford and his crew had torn down the old structure, he called me and told me to get a hold of Bill, and we'd meet up there on the lot. And he said, I'm all but done. He said, I got one little chore to do. There's one gas line that's bent and sticking straight up there. And he said, we haven't taken that out yet, but we will. And he said, and I'll smooth out the rest of the land and everything. And he said, now, he said, you guys were really nice to work with. He said, you didn't hassle me, you didn't beat me up or anything like that. He said, so I want to do a little something. So he opened up that bib of the overhauls and he took out a check. He said, handed it to me. He said, Mr. Patton, he said, that's $1,000, and that's my gift to the building fund.
Oh, wow.
And Bill and I had already had a little brief conversation because I knew that we didn't have the money to finish paying him off. We depleted the money to buy stuff, make commitments. And Bill said to me when I called and told him that we was going to meet Elmer, he said, Jim, what are we going to do? He said, we don't have $4,000 left laying around. I said, well, we're just going to tell him that and tell him we'll get him paid as soon as we can. I said, he understands, or he will understand. And at that point, Bill and I were looking at each other because he knew that $4,000 was going to come up next. And he said, and now, he said, about the $4,000. He opened up the other pocket in the bib overhauls and pulled it out and handed me a check for $4,000. We thought we were paying him. The $4,000 was what he was going to pay us.
Oh.
Because out of what he sold.
Right.
Bill, it was a couple of blank looks right there for just a minute.
I can only imagine. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So not only did you get it done for free, but you got paid.
And he donated $1,000 as well.
Wow.
So he told us, Bill and I know where to sell salvage material. Mm-hmm. He said, and by the way, he said, those beams didn't go to California. They went to a fancy home in Hawaii.
Hawaii? Oh, wow.
But he knew what he's going to get in the brick. He knew, and the folding chairs that were up in the balcony, we'd had some people ask about that. He said, no. He said, we're not going to auction those off. He said, I have some lady friends in Bartlesville. I have a small church on the west side of Bartlesville. He said, and they're in need. They're using old wore-out individual folding chairs. He said, I'm giving those to my black lady friends to go in their Baptist church on the west side of Bartlesville. And that's where those folding chairs went.
So in the alleyway outside of the church now, on the west side, there are some heavy stone, big, they're just sitting there now. I mean, there's grass around them, but do you know if those came from, they're like pillars or something, or maybe they were around the windows of the second building, or do you know anything about those?
No, I don't.
And some of them are in the parsonage backyard as well, behind that shed. It seems to me that, I don't know where it would come from.
I'm sure they came out of the old structure, but I don't know.
Okay. So the whole demolition process, while that building's being dismantled, the congregation is meeting in the education building for
That's
worship.
right. We met upstairs on the, there's a larger room upstairs the educational building on the alley side, which would be the west side. That's where we met for church services.
They have a larger room on the other side now, but now on the alley side, it's smaller rooms. There's no way the congregation. So I guess they put up walls somewhere down the line.
Possibly.
Okay. So at that point, average worship attendance must have been over 100 at least.
I think it probably peaked at that, but I think normally somewhere between a low of 75 and a high of 100.
Really? Yeah. Huh. Okay. So y'all were meeting up there for how long? How long between last Sunday in the old sanctuary and new Sunday in the new sanctuary?
Probably close to over a year and less than 2.
Okay. And then did the congregation hold steady during that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, actually, it was a very bonding experience. They were kinder, they were cooperative, and even though there was tight quarters and all, nobody complained or bickered. It was a good time in some ways. In that regard, we did have a vote. That's important, and I'll pass that along. Everybody, and it was well announced what Sunday it was going to be, and it was probably early 1970s, 1970 rather. It was for building a new one or no, not building a new one. And everybody that had a membership were allowed to vote. And I don't recall the actual count, but it was, for all practical purposes, unanimous. But there were 2 no votes.
On building a new building. Yeah.
Yes. Now there was a bus agent here in town, and an older lady managed it, lived in the back of it. Bus office was down on South Maple and the street. And can you help me with her name, Linda?
She had red hair.
Oh yeah, fiery red hair, and she had the personality to go with the fiery red hair. Very outspoken, and a very devout Methodist. There was 2 no votes, and it was about mid-year 1970, somewhere between late spring and early summer. The lady came down to the tire and appliance store where I was at in the morning, mid-morning, about 10:30. She came in and opened the front door, and she said, "Mr. Patton, I've got something on my conscience and I need to get off." She said, "It's been bothering me for some time." And I'll give the language verbatim. She said, "You know those 2 no votes?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." She said, "I'm sorry to say that I was one of those 2 no votes." And she said, "And I was wrong." I said, "Well, okay, I appreciate you coming by and clearing that up." She said, "And I don't know who in the hell was the other no vote."
Yeah.
She was fiery. And out the door she went.
So that was a vote that was taken in 1968?
No, that was either late 69 or early
Okay.
70.
Okay, yeah, that was when y'all were still hatching the plan. Y'all, the church had blueprints and final plans for the new structure before y'all began on.
Russell McGee did all the architect and
Yeah.
drew it all up and everything, and we presented it to the building committee, who immediately approved it. That was nothing else was taken to the congregation for a vote.
Mm-hmm.
The building committee made all the construction decisions, and anything that had to be done, it was brought to them, and we got a consensus, or I took a vote. I chaired all those meetings that during the construction period. Sometimes they were very heated. Bill, bless his heart, it couldn't have been built with him, and it almost was built without him, because he irritated and alienated people with ease. He didn't mean to, but his personality was that.
But we're talking just about the building committee, those 12 guys, okay.
Uh-huh. Well, and yes, and sometimes we had meetings on Sunday services and give updates. He'd give updates on construction, and I'd tell him where we were at money-wise. And I was forever cooling it off because Bill irritated a lot of the congregation. But it worked. That's what counted.
With respect, I remember the very first time I walked into the sanctuary, and it's on a slant. The roof is slanted, just one direction. It's not symmetrical. It's just up high at the right and down low at the left, and then there's chandeliers hanging. It's a very loud statement. Was that all one person's idea? Was that a group decision? Was there any pushback on that to be less innovative?
There was actually no pushback. It took a few of the older ones, congregation members, to embrace that type of design. But it was perfect for the lot and to tie into the educational building, and that was 100% Russell McGee, the architect. He did a fantastic job there, and
well, it's kind of a bold, I mean,
it
especially
was,
for the early
it was,
70s.
It was. But once they saw it and got their mind around it all, the congregation really endorsed it. And still, it's unique, but it adds a great dimension to the overall facility.
Mm-hmm. So construction got started immediately after demolition.
We did.
And did it
We
go
did.
smoothly, or did it turn into one of these things
No,
that?
no. The committee of 12. There was discussion, a lot of it, but there was no hostilities. Some people, when you have 12 people, many of them have limited knowledge of construction, that sort of thing. There was a lot of times about answering questions and everything. You take Mary Nell Warwick, choir director,
Yeah.
and her mother, one of the charter members of the church, probably. I don't know for sure, but there for many, many years, Mrs. McSpadden.
Yeah, Beulah.
Yes. Mary Nell, bless her heart, couldn't grasp the concept of how the choir was going to enter into the choir loft.
Oh yeah, that's important.
And yeah, it was to her,
Yeah.
for sure. And Bill was doing his best to explain that to her. And he wasn't doing very well. And finally he used the term, well, Mary Nell, it's kind of like a tunnel, but the congregation can't see you until you walk through and you come up to the loft. And she never said anything more, but over the next week, that woman was grief-stricken. And I said, Mary Nell, what is it that's bothering you? She said, she's in tears. She said, Jim, I just can't envision, I can't get over the choir members having to crawl down that tunnel to get to the choir loft. I said, oh no, that's not what he meant. She said, that's what he said. I said, no, it doesn't have a top on it. It's a wall, and you walk down. I said, it's kind of a hallway.
Uh-huh.
And then you come up a few steps and come into the choir. She said, you mean we don't have to get in a tunnel and crawl? I said, no, it's not a tunnel. No. And there was a few little instances like that.
Uh-huh.
We look back on them, they're humorous, but it was darn serious at the time, I'll tell you.
But were those conversations happening? Surely that took place before construction began.
That's correct.
Okay.
He was explaining the floor plan and all that,
Uh-huh.
and what have you. I had an interesting one. We had an older congregation lady by the name of Mrs. Fronberger. She was up in years, probably in her late 70s, maybe early 80s. And when I given updates and that sort of thing, early of the fundraising, Mrs. Fronberger came to me and she said, Jim, I want to give $1,000. Now, this lady was on Social Security.
Oh my.
And she said, but I need to have some accommodation. I said, Miss Fronberger, what do you want? What do you need? She said, I'm going to give you a check right now for $500. She said, but she said, the other $500, I have a CD, and it's not due until October. She said, and I don't want to go cash that in and take a penalty on it. I said, oh, that's okay. Don't worry about that. She said, that's what I want to do. And I said, it's okay. Well, came along somewhere in late August, and she had to go to the hospital for surgery. Fairly routine. I don't know what it was, and she called me and she said, I need to see you. I said, okay. She said, but I'll just talk to you Sunday morning. So Sunday morning came, and she said, I'm going to go in for that surgery this week. She said, and I don't know if I don't make it. She said, my family's already been instructed that you are allowed to come to my house and go into my bedroom. She said, in my chest of drawers, she said, there's a doily on it. It's crocheted. She said, underneath it will be an envelope. And you are to be, family's supposed to allow you to go in the bedroom by yourself with the door closed, and you get that envelope. She said, and that's my check for $500. She said, I said, you don't need to do that, Miss Fronberg. She said, yes, I do. She said, I have to know that it will be taken care of if I don't make it. I said, well, you're going to make it. She said, well, we hope so, but well, fortunately, I didn't have to go to the bedroom.
Oh, good.
She made it, and she gave me that check in October.
What a lady.
Yeah, those are kind of bring tears to your eyes.
Yeah.
Dewey Ward had a men's clothing store here and long since retired. I went to Dewey, I don't know how many times, 6, 7, 8 times. Every time I had bills coming due and didn't have the money, and Mr. Ward always give me a significant check. Toward the end, I went up to his house on Walnut Street, Hickory rather, and he's just a little abrupt. And but he did give me a check. The next day or two, I think it was 2 days, he said, he called me. He said, I need to apologize. He said, I was really hateful. I said, no, you're just a little abrupt. I said, but I think that was my 6th or 7th time. He said, you come back, Jim, anytime you need the money, and I'll be polite. He said, I was just having a bad day. That kind of things have really, it's just amazing how they responded. Mrs. Grigsby, the doctor's wife, she didn't attend much, but she called me and said, come by the house, and there was always a check for several $100s. It was spread out over a period of time. Those kind of things were just so uplifting. Another thing that I did over time, the directed receipts. There was 2 accounts. One was memorials, and one of them was earmarked. Usually they were older parents or somebody had died in the community, and they gave a $50 or $100 to in their name to the Methodist Church. And those were accumulated, and those were directed where they couldn't be used for general budget expenses and that sort of thing. And between the two, there was something in excess of $15,000, $16,000, $17,000, and they'd been there for years. Sometimes it came in $25, $50 a time, or if you have the right kind of funeral, why, there might be $500-600 come in. But that money had never been used. Some of it was designated for choir, music, or this or that. And I emptied every one of them because we needed the money. And with the knowledge of the building committee, and every time we did, if we had an address, I sent a personal note to the family telling them that we had used the great aunt or the grandmother's directed receipts money in the memorials, and told them what bills I had used for it. And I didn't receive any complaints at all.
Oh, wow.
However, several years later, at an administrative board meeting, a couple came to the meeting. They wanted to be on the agenda. The lady asked for it. And he was sitting there, her husband, and came time for her to speak. She said, well, I've just had something that's been bothering me for several years, and I want to get it squared away. She said, it's been bothering me, and I need to just let you people know. She said, I want to know which one of you emptied my mother or my grandmother's memorial fund and bought that god-awful, ugly, flowered chair in that classroom. There was a chair there, and it was flowered, and it was ugly.
Yeah.
And everybody looked around. Nobody wanted to answer it. By that time, all the eyes were focused on me. And okay, here we go. And then I looked over at her husband, Jim Patton. He had a little smile on his face, and I knew then I was being played.
Okay.
And I said, well, Mary
Ann Todd.
Mary Ann, I'm the one that was guilty. She said, well, I already knew that. She said, I just came here to aggravate you. She said, I want to thank you for doing that. My mother would have, and I knew her mother, Edith, Neff.
Yeah.
I'd sold her appliances and that sort of thing. We were good friends. She said, Mother would have been thrilled. She said, but I just couldn't resist setting you up.
She sat through a whole meeting to do that to you?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. She wanted.
They were in worship a month ago.
Well,
Jimbo and Mary Ann and their whole tribe filled up a whole pew.
yeah.
So it'd been a while. They're living over in Tulsa now, and they travel the world 6 months a week at least.
That money's old.
Yeah. So y'all got the plans drawn up over deliberations over a year. Well, no, actually, McGee drew them all up, and it was just your job pretty much to approve it and get everybody signed on to it. Okay.
And updated. And we did a good job of keeping the congregation as a whole informed. And the 12 people on the building committee, they've all worked together very well.
And Mary Nell was one of them?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. That's an absolute.
Yeah.
And needed to be, because
Sure.
choir is very important.
Of course. No, at the beginning, I thought you said 12 men and Mary Nell not a man.
No,
so.
there was 12 people.
Sure.
I probably did say that, but there was 12 people, and it was balanced.
Yeah.
Helen Mersani was on there. I don't know if Mary Jeanette Wigger was on there or not, but it could have been. And
I should have looked at
Mrs.
those
Schaefer, the
documents.
historian, I think was asked and declined.
No, Floyd Schaefer.
She was up in age and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But everybody was constantly kept up to date.
And then you were the primary coordinating the income and the outflow of money around those projects. And then did the pastor play much of a role at that time? Okay,
Kermit Dodd. Well, I'll back up a minute. In late 1969 and up until the spring of 1970, Don Bradford was the preacher here in town. And Don was a good preacher. Sermons were very good. He just had one little glitch that had caused some concern. Vietnam War was going on, and Don and his wife had very sincere opinions about the Vietnam War, and he'd preached about it from the pulpit against it.
Yeah.
And Don had been made aware on behalf of the administrative board. I didn't chair that, but I was a member of it. Taper off. Don't do that. Because we had several folks in the congregation. Some of them were direct family members. Some of them were 2 or 3 times removed. But quit preaching against the Vietnam War, because we had congregation members who had boys over there in combat, and it was bothering them, and they said, and Don continued to do it. And that was one of the reasons why it was asked that he not return. Well, actually, it was a major reason.
Yeah.
And that was sad, but that was a reality of
the time. Yeah.
And I'll not go into any greater detail, but that was it in a nutshell.
But then Reverend Dodd came, and from what
He
I could
did.
tell, he was very well received by the
He
congregation.
was. He was older. He came into the Methodist preacher list when they merged with United Brethren.
Right.
And
In 1960. Well.
and he was a prince of a guy, and so was Mrs.
Dodd.
He's the one that convinced the finance committee. Pony Express had a couple of bags that was set up, sewn in the shape of saddlebags, and we put all the materials in it. The pledge cards, or estimated estimate of giving, is what they actually were.
Right.
And he said, "This will work." He said, "I've used it in different churches." He said, "It's better than having the preacher in the pulpit or finance committee going out and meeting people in their homes." He said, "Let them do it in the privacy of their home." He said, "And this is how it works. We'll divide up in so many groups, about 5 or 6. We'll do it by neighborhoods, or people can say, 'I'll take this,' and one person will get it, fill it out, put it in the other side of the bag, and take it to the next person on the list." Nobody had to go take it to the next person. There were about 6 to 8 people on a set of bags. He said, "It'll work." Well, we were all apprehensive about it, but we yielded, and sure enough, it worked a charm.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was used for 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, I think so,
Extended
yeah.
period of time here
Yeah.
before it kind of run its course. And Kermit and I worked together closely on finances and that sort of thing, on the building fund as well as general account. And he wanted to start a reserve building mortgage account. And he'd talked to, I don't know, 3 or 4 memberships, people in the church, and he sensed, or maybe even heard from some congregation, Jim's not going to like that. So Kermit called me and he said, I need to talk to you. And I said, "Okay, I'll come see you." He said, no, I'm going to come to your place of business. So he did. In the morning, about mid-morning, he said, I understand that you're apprehensive. I said, yeah, I am about this project of yours. I said, he was going to members and asking them if they would give an additional amount every month to go into a reserve account to make the mortgage payment. And his thinking was, when he started, his goal was he wanted to get a year's reserve of payment so that if anything went wrong and the government fell off. Of course, he was getting up close to retirement, and he said, Jim, he said, some of this is self-serving on my part. He said, I want to make sure I can make it here before they run me off, before I retire. He said, we're happy here and everything. And I said, well, Kermit, my concern is that these people will mean well, and it's a worthwhile cause and everything, but after they do that a month or two, then they might cut back on what they're giving to the general budget. And I said, I can't have that. We don't have a surplus there. If that falls off, got utilities and salaries and insurance and stuff, I got to be concerned how we're going to meet those obligations. He said, no, I will not do that. He said, I'll give you my word. And that was like better than a bond. Anybody I go see about this, they'll understand that this is over and above and they can't cut back on the other. Well, I said, you do that, Kermit, I'll endorse it from the pulpit. And I did. And he said, but if I get more money than that, he said, Jim, I'm not going to shut it off. He said, I'm going to let it go. Let them continue to give. He said, my goal is 1 year, which is about $7,200. That payment was about $600, if I remember right. It's in that neighborhood. And he said, when it gets to the point in that fund that it equals the unpaid balance, we'll go pay that note off. He said, then I'll tell them, I'll release them that they don't need to do that because we don't have a purpose for it. Sure enough, it was no time until he had 18 months in that account. And as soon as it equaled that, this mortgage burning took place. And I can't say enough good about Kermit Dodd.
Neat. Yeah.
He it's not unusual. Preachers, they're uncomfortable with doing the sermons on the giving in the pulpit. Some of them can do it. Some of them, it is really anguish for them. And Bill McCaskill, he just couldn't do it. Bill and I worked together closely. We were really good friends. He was a preacher that followed Kermit. But he couldn't do the budget and everything. We had a standing disagreement, friendly-wise. I prepared the budget and gave it all out to the membership. And then we raised the money. And I was for giving them an updated, amended budget based on the estimates of giving. But we never did do it because Bill couldn't do it. He was too painful for him. He'd have to report to him.
So you kept on as finance chair
I
even
did.
after construction.
I did. Of course, it's easy for me. I'm good at that.
Yeah.
And I should have been the one.
Yeah. So let's go back to the time of construction, though. Everything went pretty smoothly with did everything go up at the right rate, and there weren't any issues, and it all came up on schedule, and you had a wonderful re-entering the new sanctuary. And
when we got down toward the end, I took the last money out of some of those directed receipts and finished the pews. I told them
so there were pews when, for some reason, I thought the congregation was in chairs for a bit before the pew, but the pews were there.
No, in the new sanctuary.
Yes.
The pews that went in.
Yeah.
Was one of the last expenses.
Okay.
And that's where I took some of the last directed receipts and bought the pews. And when I sent the card out, I said, now, if you want a little plaque, a little brass plaque, we'll put them on the end.
Right.
I don't know if I had anybody ask for it or not. I don't recall, but that was where the last money of the director receipts went.
Well, now there's a plaque on, I think, every pew in there.
Well, then that's what they asked for then.
Yeah. Well,
It was a wonderful experience on my part. I really enjoyed it.
see, you talk about it, it sounds stressful to me, but it seems that you're cut out for that sort of work, and you were the man for the challenge.
Yeah, anytime you do it with money, people get a little animated and all, but when it gets right down to it, they do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gone through a lot of the church documents and scanned what I could and filed what I could, and I found 5 different notes from the 1960s sent out by the Finance Committee saying if y'all don't give, we can't maintain our budget, you know. And I thought, man, it must have been a stressful time to be in the church because it was constant worry about money. So, you know, this is all common. I wanted to wrap for today, and I'm sure there's 100 things that we still could talk about that would be wonderful. But I just want to praise the church a little bit for how it is today, because when I had been here not even a month, the heating and air conditioning just crashed, and we needed to replace it all in the sanctuary and the attached buildings, and it was going to cost over $30,000. And I was told, you know, we're not making enough. We're losing money month to month. We're not going to be able to do this. Well, the money came together pretty quickly, and then soon after that, the flat roof that we have between the education wing and the sanctuary gave out. It was a terrible leakage situation. We had to replace that. Another $30,000 came together like that. And then the parking situation, the semicircle parking that had been plaguing the church for decades, it needed to get figured out. That one was $15,000. Came together like that. We had a backyard fence that needed put up. There were prisoners in the jail that were out there, and my wife needed to be out there hanging clothes and stuff. That was all those materials came together like that. I can honestly say I haven't had to beg for money once since I've been here in the almost 6 years that I've been here. We haven't had to put together a big capital campaign. We've thought about, you know, do we need to do, but the money has always come together, and the church is in great financial condition now. And I think that would only happen, that probably only happened because of good financial stewardship before I got here.
The money was here.
Right.
What happened between 1953 and 1969 on that education building, there was no reason, no excuses for that. I would say Joe Carson, minister, had just gotten tired and wore out and just let it go and didn't report or tell anybody. I've often heard as a boy growing up, oh, the Lord will provide.
Right.
Well, yes, but I take some exception with that because it's up to us to take care of financial obligations.
Yes.
And I feel strongly about it. I did then, I still do. Run our household the same way. We live within our means. We're very comfortable. But it's still the congregation's responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
And the Lord will provide, but it's up to us to do our part.
Well, and he's not going to provide for people who don't care to live the way that he's told us to live, you know. So God loves a cheerful giver. We have some cheerful givers in this church, and I don't think that has always been the case, but it sure sounds like, you know, I wanted to praise the church for how they are now, but I want to praise you for who you were in the moment that the church needed you, because it sounds like you really were what was needed in the time. So thank you.
I provided all the appliances that went into the kitchen.
There you go.
And it's one of the few things that Bill Brown and I never didn't agree on. I provided those at my absolute cost. And Bill said, no. He said, you're entitled to profit. I said, on retail sales and to the public, yes. But this is not that, and this is my business. Bill. I can do what I want to. I'm selling him at cost. He said, okay, but what's retail? I said, no, don't do that. He was going to send me a tax write-off deal for retail. He said, no, that's legit. I said, I understand it's legal, but it's not legal I'm fooling with here. It's my conscience.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't want that.
Yeah.
But he said, well, I'm doing it. I said, I understand that. And then some, probably. He didn't comment on that remark. We were good enough friends that we knew when to quit. I've tried my best, Jeffrey, and I don't remember for sure. I think we raised $135,000.
Wow.
I think that's what we did.
It's quite a sum. And in the early 1970s, that's
Yeah,
much more than today.
It was today we're because probably 8 or 10 times that amount. But it was here. Now it came in slowly, but people's finances come in slowly.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, thanks for setting aside the time for this and
You're
sharing a
welcome.
lot of these anecdotes. I loved it, and hope it's been a blessing to anyone who watched it. There's a lot more good history here, and I hope to sit down with Jim and others and record some good church history. But
sadly, out of those 12 people, I'm the only one left.
Right.
Yeah.
And I should have done this interview a long time ago. So thanks for holding out for me.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's draw it to a close. Thanks. Blessings to everybody who watched.